This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. In the words of the immortal AC/DC, it is harder than it looks. These interviews will give you a glimpse into the lives of the artists that we've sung along with, danced and rocked out to. Some go deep into their past and others celebrate their recent releases. But all of them show that regardless of who you are, it's always a long way to the top. The Dirty Strangers are possibly the most famous band you've never heard of, described by Louder Sound as fast times, famous friends, and filthy rock and roll. The lead singer Alan Clayton has toked with Bob Marley, performed with Bobby Keys, and partied with Keith Richards. They are straightforward rock and roll, equal parts Chuck Berry, equal parts Otis Reeding, and equal parts a bottle of Jack Daniels. The Dirty Strangers have a new album on the way, Hunter's Moon, and a brand new single, My Girl's Getaway Driver. Not even bad internet could stop this interview from happening. Enjoy Alan Clayton from The Dirty Strangers on this week's episode of Long Way to the Top. Alan Clayton, welcome to the show.
Don't mix.
I was going to say, don't mix you up with Adam Clayton, right?
Listen, I don't mind if you're the PRS sending me his checks. On an interview, I'd like to be your own name. In fact, do you know what? I actually got one of his checks in the 80s.
Did you really?
Check. Yeah, and it was £1.85, too small to pay.
Oh Jesus! It wasn't much, was it? What album was that from?
I'm not too sure. It was I had a small amount from Paul Hewson, which is Bono's name.
Yes.
Some weird reason, and I had one thing from Adam Clayton. It actually said too small to pay. So, I don't know. So he obviously weren't big on the songwriting.
Obviously not. I don't think he was until later on. Actually, I think most of it was Bono and The Edge. But
and The Edge, yeah.
Yeah. But they were sort of after your time. You've been around a lot longer than what they have.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when did they start, you two?
Oh, gee, I reckon it was the very late 70s, beginning of the 80s was when they first kicked off.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started about 78. I mean, I actually, because you probably know that I used to do security work and bouncing and bodyguarding, and I've done all that sort of weird stuff. And I worked at the Lyceum. I think it was their first, like they were first on the bill there.
Yeah.
When they first come over, I think I'd done Hope and Anchor in London, and I used to work for a promoter called John Curd. He used to put all these fantastic shows at the Lyceum every week in London, from like 77 to about 80, and we started about 78. So similar time, not too far.
They wouldn't have been very good then, though. They were pretty bad.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I remember seeing them and thinking there was something about them.
Yeah.
But without being able to put your foot, because when you work with bands all the time, you see so many.
Yeah. And
every now and again, listen, I can remember, I work with hundreds of bands and I can still remember them being on. So there must have been something about them.
We're all like that, really. When we start out, I'm speaking as if I'm a musician, which I'm totally not, by the way. But
in the music, we're all the same.
That's right. But it's like it's those early days that you're really forming your sound and who you are.
Yeah.
What was the influence with you, and what now is coming through with the Dirty Strangers?
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, your influences, like everybody, everyone has a golden period in their life when they're 14 to 18, and that's the songs that save you, isn't it, really? And my songs were, my influences was Motown, Stax. My dad was a Teddy boy,
right?
So that's where the rock and roll come from. Because I grew up listening to rock and roll from my dad.
Yeah.
And then I found my own music, which was soul and Motown.
Yeah.
And then I found out I could write poems. Right. And then a friend of mine said to me, do you know rock and roll's only 3 chords? And being quite a lazy bloke and looking for shortcuts, I thought, sweet, that'll do for me. But obviously it's a lot more than that. So I actually learned the guitar to put tunes to the poems that I was writing.
Mm.
But I would say my biggest influence is my dad,
Yeah,
Johnny
right.
Clayton, who was a singer as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
do you know that? Did you know that he brought out an album with Keith Richards and Bobby Keys and all these
So that
people
was the
on?
connection, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my dad, and enthusiasm. I was a bit of a football hooligan when I was younger, so I liked the mass sing along.
Yeah.
There was lots of influences, to be honest with you. A
Yeah.
hell of a lot of influence. The musical ones was the rock and roll, soul, and Motown,
Yeah.
and making women dance.
Yes.
Who doesn't like watching women dance?
Who
So that
doesn't?
was my main objective with the band.
So rock and roll. I mean, when we talk rock and roll, and you say, that's a big influence for you. It's no stranger that you ended up gravitating towards, guys like the Rolling Stones, because
No.
at their heart, they're pure rock and roll.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. Well, Keith Richards, who's my main friend,
Yeah.
he definitely is. He lives and breathes it.
Yeah.
He's not interested, he just lives and breathes it.
Yeah.
And what was great about when I met him is that, he won't mind me saying this, I wasn't the biggest Rolling Stones fan. So I liked the stuff that they liked.
Yeah.
Rather than, I wasn't, I didn't walk in the room and go, what were the strings you played on so-and-so? And what about that track? I didn't know. He'd play tracks and I'd say, what's this song then? And he'd go, oh, this is off a so-and-so album. And so we actually both liked similar stuff, and that was our connection, really.
And that's probably why you're friends.
Well, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the last thing he needs is lots of Rolling Stones questions in his downtime.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I mentioned at the start that you were toking with Bob Marley. What was the connection with Bob Marley there?
Well, when I used to do security work, I actually in the late 70s. I started in 76, and I done, and the firm that I worked for, they done 6 nights with Bob Marley at Hammersmith Odeon. And then Bob Marley played the Crystal Palace Bowl, big open air festival.
Yeah.
And I worked at it.
Yeah.
And his dressing room, because it was an outdoor concert, was a tent backstage, and it was my job to look after his tent. And what happened is, during the day, back in the late 70s, security wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
It was like a small fence around the backstage area that people could jump over, and it was and him being like a god to West Indian people and everything, everyone and his brother was there trying to meet him.
Yes.
And I was the person who was looking after his dressing room, stopping everyone getting in and everything. And I had a tap on my shoulder, and his mate said, "Yeah, come in," because I was getting very irate. Brought me into his dressing room, sat me next to Bob Marley, who was sitting on an amp playing the guitar. Shut the dressing room door, locked it, rolled a big spliff up, and give it to me, and said, "Here, I'll chill out and listen to Bob." And I sat there for half an hour, the big joint, chilling out, listening to Bob Marley, and got myself ready for the rest of the day. So that was it. That was the thing, really. So it's quite privileged. I was sitting next to him while he was playing.
So hanging out with all of these incredible artists, and working backstage, at what point did you go, right, that's it, I've got to get up on stage now?
I've always been a bit of an extrovert and a bit of a performer, but I was actually getting the band together while I was doing that work. So really, what happens? My first ever gig was at Keith Richards' Bodyguard's pub, because he had a pub, and big Joe Seabrook. And when I got enough songs and I was better and good enough, I'll drop the security, because I wanted to do music from then on. Yeah. Really.
When you first got up on stage, and you were doing your initial performance, was Keith in the audience there? Because that would have made it very awkward. No, he wasn't in the audience. I
Although I have. Funny enough, when it was Big Joe's funeral, all the Rolling Stones were there, and I performed in front of them. So, but yeah, you just do what you do. I mean, he wasn't there the first time. I didn't meet Keith till 1980, 81.
Yeah.
So he wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd like to have been though.
I'm sure he would have. Now you've done heaps of albums over the years.
Yeah.
You seem to have in each of the different albums that you've done, you seem to have a go with a different sort of style in each one. I mean, is it an evolution with the band, or is it just because maybe different influences at the time?
Do you know what? It's interesting you say that, because I haven't realised that. I just thought it was all rock and roll from where we go. I mean, obviously, recording techniques sometimes determine how you sound, because when we started in the 80s, it was the sort of evolution of the studio with gadgets galore and samples, and so it went from being a very raw recording process to a very complicated recording process, all driven by the engineers and the studios who had all this gear and thought that you had to use all these gears to get a good sound. So you're probably right. The early albums don't sound as raw as the later ones. But I think that's down to the recording techniques in the times, to be honest with you. But the way I've written songs has always been the same. It's always sat down with an acoustic guitar and wrote. I think sometimes the era you record them in determines how they sound sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely does. Burn the Bubble was one of my favourite albums.
Oh, good man. Not many people talk about that one. I love it. Yeah.
Love it. And,
do you know what Burn the Bubble means?
No, I don't. Tell me what Burn the Bubble means.
Before I tell you, what do you think it means? Any English people
I have no idea. I have no idea. You're going to tell me what it means.
Well, in England, there's a thing that you have with breakfast, which are leftovers from the night before, and it's called bubble and squeak.
Right. We have bubble and squeak here. Right. I had no idea it was going to be related to that.
Right. So when we used to go in a cafe, and if you have bubble and squeak, you have to have it a bit burnt around the edges, otherwise it don't taste nice. Yeah. So we used to go in a cafe and we go egg and bacon and bubble, and can we have the bubble well done? And the bloke used to shout out, egg and a bacon and burn the bubble. And that's where the title come from.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, Keith Richards actually co-wrote Saturday Night on that song.
He did, yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I went over to, I was staying with him in New York. After the first album come out, I went over there to play it to him and stayed with him and hung out. And he said, listen, I've got a couple of songs that I've written. Do you fancy writing words to them for them? And I can remember he gave me a cassette. That's how long ago it was. And it had Brushed Curls. I don't know why. That's what it had on the cassette. Brushed Curls.
Yeah. And
he said, there's a couple of songs on there. And one of them was Saturday Night, where it had no words. It was just a tune.
Yeah.
So I wrote words to it. That's how Saturday Night come about. And what the unfortunate is that on that cassette was about probably 2 other tunes that needed words written to it. I lent it to my friend Paul Fox, who was in the band at the time, and he lost it.
No.
So I'd only managed to write. Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah. And but lucky I'd written one song, and that's how Saturday Night come about, out of a cassette that Keith gave me with ideas on.
Oh, you didn't go back to Keith and say, "Oh, listen, mate, I've lost your songs."
Yeah, any chance you can send me a couple more over?
They were good songs, but
you got a couple more hanging about. Yeah. No, I couldn't do. I couldn't go to Lost Luggage on that one.
Yeah, I want to ask you also about the. There's a story about Keith sort of giving you the Gibson Hummingbird to play.
Oh yeah. That was special, wasn't it? Eh?
I mean, how special was that? Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what happened is that the first, the lineup of the Dirty Strangers, we recorded the Dirty Strangers and Burn the Bubble.
Mm.
It sort of come to its natural end because, it just did. We didn't fall out, we didn't break up. It just sort of fizzled out because there was no money about, and we'd given lots of years, or the band had given lots of years of their life to it. I formed a three-piece, which eventually became the one that done West 12 Twittering album.
Yep.
But we were called Monkey Seed or Jack the Lad. We were called some name anyway.
Yep.
I'd done a gig in Croydon, which is South London, which is not far from Redlands. And me and my wife Jackie, we drove down to Redlands after the show to stay with Keith and hang out with him. And this is the first time that I'd gone from being a vocalist to playing the guitar, And I had two guitars with me, two Telecasters that I've been playing. I put them in the hallway, stayed up late with him, got up the next day, was about to leave, and he went, "You've forgotten a guitar." And I went, "What do you mean? I've only got two." He went, "No, I want you to have this one." And I looked up on the wall, and there's him and Graham Parsons during the Exile times, sitting on the sofa, and I said, "Is that the guitar you've just given me?" He went, "Yeah, I wrote all my stuff on it, all the Exile stuff, all the early stuff." And he said, "I want you to have it now." And what was great about it, Shane, is that I never had an acoustic guitar, so it became a working guitar, which is what they should be. They're only bits of wood and metal if they're not working.
Yeah.
And he knew that I'd give it another lease of life. And I wrote the last album on it, the one that I've just bought out. I wrote it on that guitar.
Wow.
And believe me, it plays as good as its history. It's not like just a monument. It's a beautiful guitar and a lovely guitar.
Yeah.
Lovely. And I'm so honoured to have it.
Yeah.
I'm so honoured to have it.
That is so. Oh, it reminds me of a story. I was talking with Rick from Cheap Trick, and he was saying that he went to John Lennon's Double Fantasy, the recordings of that, and he was going to be doing some work on that. He lent John his guitar. Then John went and died on him, and he didn't get the guitar back for years.
That's a bit awkward, isn't it? You can't ring up. You have to leave it a certain amount of time before you ring a widow up.
Anyway, Yoko finally sent it to him and said, "Oh, John would like you to have that." And he said, "Yeah, of course he would, because it was my guitar."
Fantastic.
You not only had the opportunity to work with Keith, but you also got the opportunity to work with Ronnie Wood as well.
Well, I actually met Ronnie Wood before I met Keith.
Oh, did you really? Right.
Yeah. I mean, I knew. Obviously, my friend Joe Seabrook became Keith's bodyguard, and also by coincidence, a mate of mine, Dave Edmonds, not the singer, but he was their monitor man on the 1980-81 tour, and Keith hadn't come to London yet. Ronnie was staying in Olympia in London, and I met Ronnie, and Ronnie actually played on 3 songs, Babe, on the first album.
Yeah,
Baby, Here She Come, and Diamonds, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think we put that version out, and then I met Keith after that. Funny enough.
Yeah.
So I met Ronnie first, although my friendship with Keith is a much deeper and longer friendship. Although I still know Ronnie, but it's me and Keith have got a real deep friendship, definitely.
Yeah. And while we're talking about the Stones, and before we move on to the new album, also Bobby as well. You played with him. Incredible saxophone player, amazing.
Oh, amazing sax. Well, I mean, I got to know Bobby over the years through Keith, because they got the same birthday and they're great mates, and he first played with us on my dad's album, because I'd done an album with my dad called Learning the Blues. Have you heard that, Shane?
No, I haven't.
Well, Ian managed the band at the time.
Right.
And so my dad got dementia in his mid 80s.
Yeah.
And he's always been a singer. So I said, "Do you want to do an album?" And he went, "I'd love to do an album." So the first person to offer his services was Keith Richards. He done Bad Leroy Brown.
Right.
And then I said to Bobby, will you play my dad's album? And he looked at me and he said, "How can I say no? It's your dad. Of course I will." So
That's good.
So he come round my house. My dad was there. Come down. This is when I lived in Shepherd's Bush, and come down the studio and play and recorded on my dad's album. And that week, the Stones were playing in Hyde Park on Saturday, and then the following Saturday,
Yeah.
we had a gig in the middle of the week, and he come and done the show. Have you seen the videos at the Borderline where
No.
Bobby Keys? Well, if you look on the Dirty Strangers, there's we've done an album called A Dirty Night in London with Bobby Keys, and there's lots of videos out that we've been playing with us. You know?
Yeah. I'll definitely check that out.
And we're so honoured. And also we actually because that was the last club date he ever done, and the few days after was the last show he ever done with the Stones. No one knew that at the time. Obviously, everyone knew that he wasn't as healthy as he could have been. And we actually had a European tour where he was going to tour with us.
Yeah.
We got a tour of Europe with Bobby Keys, and unfortunately, it never happened. You know?
Wow.
Which is But what a lovely man.
Lovely, yeah, and I love incredible musician. You know, he's just one of those you can pick up. You can pick up like when he's on an album, you know it's him.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, funny enough, we're doing a 100 Club in London at the end of this month to launch a new album. And there's a friend of mine who's a great saxophone player, and we're actually going to get him up on Diamonds, just because it felt so good to have a saxophone on there before.
Yeah.
So and he's the biggest Bobby Keys fan you can imagine. In fact, I gave him when Bobby Keys done his last show with the Stones in Hyde Park. He gave me a couple of saxophone stands. I won't be leading them. I'm getting some new ones. Of course, he never. And so I gave my mate Bobby Keys his saxophone stand. So he's well happy.
Yeah, nice. Now you mentioned Ian Grant before, who was your manager at the time. I mean, another person that is just his love of the industry has taken him to some incredible places. When did that relationship start?
Well, when our first album, when it came out in 1985, I think, or something. A bloke called Robin Greatrex brought it out on Razor Records. And Robin Greatrex was a great friend of Ian Grant's. And so Ian Grant was managing Big Country at the time.
Yeah.
And he tried to get us a record deal, but his one love was Big Country, the band that he was managing. And I think what happened, he tried to get us the deal. It wasn't easy, so he had to move on because his time was too busy with Big Country. But we remained friends.
Yeah.
And then we met up at Big Joe Seabrook's funeral. After I'll see Ian intermittently, quite good friends and everything. I started talking to him, said I was doing an album. One of the big things that Ian Grant done for me, when the Dirty Strangers sort of fizzled out first time round, I had all these other band names I was going under, and he said, for a start, why are you doing that? You've got so much credibility with the Dirty Strangers, and you are the Dirty Strangers. Yeah. Call it the Dirty Strangers, you idiot. Yes. So that was good. He brought me back to my senses then. Yeah. And I had these recordings that I'd done with Keith Richards. She's a Real Botticelli and a few other songs that I've done with him. And Ian has just acquired Track Records. So he said, I'd love to put you on Track Records, and we'd ended up doing 2 albums with Ian. Had a fantastic time.
Yes,
went on some great adventures that he might have told you about. And yes, and he's been a lifelong friend ever
Yeah,
since.
nice.
I've done a couple of things. I'll dip in every now. I'll dip in because Ian gets involved with charities and stuff like that, and I'll dip in every now and again and try and help and
Yes,
do a bit
yes.
of
Well,
recording or
did he
whatever.
rope you into the
But
video?
which video?
The Think Loud video.
No, do you know what? For some reason, right? No, he didn't. No, he
No.
didn't.
Oh,
I don't know if it. I don't know if he actually tried either.
he'll get you on the next one. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. No, I think there was something going. I forget what it was. There was a reason that I couldn't do it anyway.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
I remember that. But I look,
Lovely guy.
I'll always help Ian. He's
Yeah,
lovely bloke.
lovely
Yeah,
guy. Well, let's
definitely.
talk about the new album. So, Hunter's
Oh,
Moon.
yes, please.
It's
Yeah.
due out very soon, and
Do you know what a hunter's moon is? I
well,
asked you about Burn the Bubble. Do you know
okay,
what a hunter's moon
all
is?
right. It's going to be another. It's going to be another Cockney slang, isn't it?
No, here you
No.
go. No, it's not. Sounds like it could be,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
I'll see you
No,
at the
hunter's
Hunter's
moon.
Moon. Yeah,
In
no?
England, yeah. No, in England,
Yeah,
there's all sorts of moons. There's the harvest moon, a blue moon.
yeah.
There's all these different moons, and the hunter's moon is the last moon of winter
Right,
before it gets too dark, so you can go out and do some poaching.
gotcha.
That's what a hunter's moon is. It's the last full moon. And the funny thing is, I spoke to a friend of mine who owns loads of land, and I said to him, "Do you know what hunter's moon is?" He went, "Of course I know what hunter's moon is." And I said, "Well, it's what all poachers go out." He said, "I call it gamekeeper's moon, Alan."
Mm, there you go.
He's on the other side of the fence. But that's what a hunter's moon is.
Right.
It's October the 28th this year
Yes.
over here.
Yes.
Sorry.
And is there a reason why you called the album Hunter's Moon?
But there's a funny reason, yeah. Well, there's a song on there called Hunter's Moon, so it's
Yes.
always good to have a song title
Yeah.
as a reference. And it's got a sort of mystery about it. But how I see it, I was going over to see my mum, and I was driving past her house, and there was a sign outside, and they called their house Hunter's Moon. You know, people call their houses different names.
Yes.
And there's a little sign outside that they're probably unaware there's an international album out after the name of their house, but it was out after a name of a house near my mum's.
Now, a couple of the songs that were sort of real standout. I mean, like I love My Girl's a Getaway Driver. I just think that
Fantastic.
it's pure rock and roll and bit of
1
punk.
minute 40 seconds, mate.
1 minute 40 seconds. Bit of punk thrown in.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that at all. I love that song. I love it.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is because it's also a reference to my wife, right? Because she's got me out of so much trouble in the past, Shane. You wouldn't believe it, mate. So I call her my getaway driver.
Oh, nice.
She gets me out of trouble.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And now you've got a song, Pirates Don't Get Pensions. I'm going to say that this is one of the most unusual love songs I've ever heard.
Yes, but that was a love song to my wife, actually. And a love song to my wife because she's put up with me for 40 odd years, going away, coming back with Sweet FA, you know. So, and also for musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, 99% of musicians, actors, or whatever, they go out and they don't get a pension. You know, they just put their life and soul into what they love with no thought of the future. And that's really been what my life's been like. And yeah, it's a great title, though.
It's a tough life, isn't it, on the road?
Do you know what? Unless you loved it, you wouldn't be able to hack it.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't, unless you loved it for the right reasons.
Yes.
Which is the music and the love of it and the love of playing with your band. It must be very hard. I find it very hard when I hear bands that don't get on.
Yeah.
I can't really work out what that's about.
And bands that don't tour as well, you know, that they'll put an album out and they'll be like, "No, I don't want to tour." I mean, I don't get that.
Yeah. No. Do you know what? I bite your arm off to get a big tour. I mean, we're which is your best arm?
My right
arm. Well, I'll bite your left arm up there, right? But I you know, to get to, I mean, unfortunately, we got a sizable following, but we couldn't tour America or I'd love to come to Australia, to be honest with you. I mean, what a lot of the times what we have cottoned on to is when the Stones play, because we've got a lot of Stones fans who follow us. We play the night before the Stones play, like we've done it in Barcelona, Milan, Amsterdam, Paris, London, Edinburgh, and that's great. That's like an ideal fit.
Yeah, because
the just sold out.
They're all hoping. They're all hoping that that you know, Keith or Ronnie will jump up. You know.
Do you think so?
Yes, of course they are.
I played up. Of course they are. Well, the thing is when people say to me, "Do you think they'll play with you?" I said, "Well, I'd be a liar if I said 100% no, because they have played with us in the past. I've recorded with them, played with them, and everything." And you know what? I played in when I was on the Stones tour. The band, the people that I worked with set up the Stones equipment and sound checked, so they could all play their instruments. So we formed a band, and we go and play clubs. I played CBGB's 3 times on that tour.
Right.
With the backline crew.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean, because obviously the Stones are in town. I'm playing somewhere who's Keith Richards' best mate, who's out recording with him, and Stones. Yeah. So I know that. But we played CBGB's, finished about 1 a.m, went to the dressing room. I come out of 3 a.m. There were still 4 people standing by the stage saying, "Well, you never know, because if we leave now, he might still show up."
There you go.
You read it right on.
There you go.
Yeah.
So are you're obviously touring this album, right?
We are, yeah. I mean, what we've done, we've got dates coming. We've got touring in England and that, but because of that shitstorm of Brexit that's gone on, you can't play in Europe now unless you've got unless you put up money. Before it was so easy. You just get in a van, go over with all your merchandise, play wherever you want, get paid, drive back. Now you can't take merchandise over. You can't. It's horrible what's happened to this country with as regards to music. So yeah, we'd love to, but to all them people who voted for Brexit obviously weren't musicians, because it's made it so hard for everyone to tour now.
Yeah.
Like everything, they don't think of musicians. And it's very weird when you consider this country it's known for producing music that the world loves. And yet, you know, the people who run the country don't give a monkeys about it.
It's always the way,
don't get me on that. I'll get angry.
Yeah. Let's take a listen to the first single from the Dirty Heads' new album, Hunter's Moon. This is My Girl's Getaway Driver.
Everybody's looking, but nobody can find her. 'Cause you're looking in the wrong place, miles behind her. You can't hold a real life wire. What you saying? That's right. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a real high flyer. My girl is a getaway driver. You won't catch her, she's on fire. For police operations getting wider and wider. 2 weeks in and none the wiser. You can keep on looking, you'll never find her. What you saying? That's right. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a real high flyer. My girl is a getaway driver. You won't catch her, she's on fire. I'm a late sleeper, she's an early riser. In the stars, God love to try her. When we get enough money, we're gonna retire. What you saying? That's right. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a getaway driver. My girl is a real high flyer. My girl is a getaway driver. You won't hold a real live wire. You My girl was a getaway driver.
What's the reception been like of the album so far? You know, I've seen some reviews
Well,
online. They love it.
Yeah, well, it's been great, but you're one of the very few selective heard it because no one's August the 31st is get released. So the only people who've got reviews who've been able to hear it is some radio stations and reviewers.
Yeah, right.
So by the general public, I'm sure they will love it because they generally love what we put out. But it's been well received, you know. I love it. Yeah, it has been. As far as I know, out of reviewers, I mean, this month we've got, I think, classic rock. We've got all the magazines this month for reviewing it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh well, I'll put my review up online for you. There you go.
Good man. Can you do it in capital letters? Well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, before we go, I've got a question. But first, the album is going to be available on August 31st on Spotify and wherever you can download it. But are you doing a physical version as well?
Well, at the moment we've got CDs to be available.
Yep.
And then what we do, we get CDs because it takes. This is quite a quick turnaround, this album, and it takes fucking ages to get vinyl done now. So what we do, we put CDs out, which are available from that date, and they're also on available from Cargo Records. If you go on the Dirty Strangers Facebook site or any site, you can order it from there. And then what we do, we'll get a load of vinyl, get some orders in and get some vinyl put up. But at the moment, we just wanted to get it out there for people to hear it. Without waiting for the vinyl to be done. So
I'll be putting my hand up for one of the vinyls, that's for sure. I think it's a fantastic album.
You're welcome to one. We'll send you one over. Definitely.
Now, speaking of vinyl, what have you got on your turntable at the moment?
Oh, let me have a look. I can't, can I? I'll tell you what, let me have a look. I've got some albums right next to me. Look.
All right, here we go.
Albums? Yeah, see, so they're always nearby.
Nice.
Yeah, do you want me to go through them?
What are you listening to? What's your go-to?
Oh, do you know what? Someone asked me that along. I Can Tina Turner, Dr. Feelgood.
Dr. Feelgood, nice.
Dorsey.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, when people ask me to describe the band, I'll say it's a cross between the Rolling Stones and Dr. Feelgood. Because I love Dr. Feelgood. Mink DeVille, Otis Redding, Little Feat, Roxy Music, Fabulous Thunderbirds. I'm just going through. Jackie Wills, Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, Bob Seger, Humble Pie, Faces, Graham Parker and the Rumour, Tom Petty, James Brown. Is that good enough for you?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That and right there, that explains the Dirty Strangers sound right there. Like we're just going through that.
It does.
And I think that's the one thing that we kind of, forget about, when we hear an album. It's like, what's the influence been? And I think it's really important to really look at that influence.
Yeah, well, it's a reference as well, isn't it?
It is.
It's definitely, you can all relate to.
It is.
Definitely.
It is. Well, look, Alan, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and going to be following along very closely to see if maybe one day you end up down in Australia, which would be fantastic.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I'll tell you what, I met a band from Australia because I've done some touring with the Choir Boys. There's a band called the Black Aces who come over from England.
The Black Aces, yep.
Well, say hello to them for us because they're the only Australian band I know.
Well, you mentioned the Choir Boys because there's an Australian band, the Choir Boys, as well.
Is there?
Yeah,
Do you know what? There was an Australian band called the Dirty Strangers years ago.
Was there really?
An Australian band called yeah.
Well, are you sure they weren't called the Dirty Heads?
No. If you look up. I'm sure it was an Australian band or a dance band, I think, or a New Zealand band.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
They never called the Dirty Strangers. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was too far for me to go home and go over and tell them they couldn't use the name. So, and they seem to fade away a bit anyway.
Well, if the Rolling Stones come back down under, I'm going to be looking out for a bar that maybe you might be performing at.
Oh, listen, if they go back over, we'd love to. And obviously, if you ever come to England, look us up and come and hang out. So.
I definitely will. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Shane.
Alan, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
And thank you very much, Shane, for taking the time and for persevering with the connection.
Awesome. Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Long Way to the Top. Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast and head over to Facebook at the Long Way to the Top podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.